It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Mr. Josh Guesman and Mr. Kevin Baxter of the LA Times are with you. Glad to have you here on a Monday as we get you prepared for this week of LA Galaxy soccer coming up. LA Galaxy obviously coming off of a 2-1 loss on the road in Orlando, a game that realistically they probably could have gotten a point out of, and realistically they probably could have gotten beat 5 or 6 or 7-1. It certainly was a lot of chances for Orlando that didn't seem to go in. The Galaxy will look to rebound as they get ready for Seattle. Kevin, what can we say about this Orlando team and an Orlando game that saw the LA Galaxy, I thought, outplayed for large portions of this game, but still realistically almost flattered with the scoreline of 2-1?
Yeah, the man of the match was clearly the goalpost. How many saves did the goalpost have? About 4? And even Alan Cedrini's goal kicked in off the goalpost.
Yeah, it was a lot of really close calls. The Galaxy, again, just I saw the stat. They've allowed the first goal in 5 of their 6 games. Even the win that they had against Real Salt Lake, they were losing 1-0, and then RSL went down to 10 men. So you look at all those things. You look at where the Galaxy are. I'm not surprised they lost in Orlando, Kevin. It's a long trip. It's a long road trip. That's a tough place to win. Orlando seems to be running on a high in terms of of winning at home. That's 4 straight for them. What did you see from this game briefly, and then we can move on to our other topics that have sort of stirred from all of this.
I think the one takeaway was, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm seeing this with a jaundice eye, but it sure seemed like Orlando wanted it more. It seemed like they fought a lot harder for the 50-50 balls. It seemed like most of their players, the work rate was really high. I mean, the Galaxy had some players that were really humping too. Alessandrini, I was, totally impressed with him. But it just seemed like of the 11 players in the field, Orlando had more of their 11 that were fighting harder and putting in more effort than the Galaxy did.
Yeah, and I think you have to expect some balance of that whenever you have these road games, right? And you certainly expect the home team to dictate the pace. If you look at the LA Galaxy, actually, I think end up having more possession in this particular game. It was like 51-49 at the end, but Orlando had so much more possession in the first half and was so much more dangerous through most of the game. Let's say there's about 30 minutes in the second half, or maybe not even 30 minutes, maybe like 25 minutes in the second half for me, Kevin, where I thought the LA Galaxy were on fire. They looked dangerous. They looked, in tune with the game. They looked like a team that, quite honestly, was almost playing up a man for about 20 minutes. They got the goal off of that. They should have got maybe 2 goals off of that at least. So you look at that, and I can pick out some high points, and I think I can find, like, if Curt Onalfo is going to tell you, Kevin, that he thought that the team actually played pretty well in some areas, I'll probably be able to point those areas out in terms of, it was that 20-25 minute period in the second half. But outside of that, I thought that they were timid. I thought that they weren't very sharp with their passing. I thought that, just coverage-wise and defense-wise, they struggled to keep up with Larin and Rivas. I thought Rivas, by the way, had a great game for Orlando. If you want to sort of point a guy who caused havoc against the LA Galaxy all night, Rivas was sort of that guy.
Well, Larin too. I mean, I thought Orlando was much more physical, especially with Larin and Rivas. The other thing is the Galaxy, there are 2 things that I think you can say after 6 games that have been fairly consistent with the Galaxy. One is a lot of trouble in the midfield, trouble getting the ball from the back line up to the strikers, up to the dangerous guys like Alessandrini. I know he's a midfielder, but he's playing sort of an advanced role. The ball is not coming through the midfield as well as it probably should, and that's where Jermaine and João Pedro are. And the other thing is, I think this has been clear from the start, the Galaxy do not play very well at the beginning, and they don't seem to finish very well. They're really good from 30 to 60 minutes. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They're really good from 30 to 60 minutes. But from the kickoff to 30 minutes and then the last 30 minutes of the game, not so much. And last thing, and Curt talked about this, set pieces still seem to give them a real difficult time
Yeah, which is interesting because I look at like some of the physical players that they have with Jermaine Jones or Jelle Van Dam, even a height advantage with Daniel Steres there, and Joao Pedro, quite honestly, is a big body as well. Maybe it's just his hair that gives me the illusion he's 6 inches taller than he actually is, but he feels like he takes up some space out there. I find them not very dangerous on set pieces going forward or in terms of defending those set pieces, and I think that's something that Curt's going to definitely have to address. But let's go to Onalfo, and we're getting the same thing sort of over and over again, Kevin, and I can understand from his point of view, but he's saying a lot like, we're going to learn from this. This is a mistake we made. We're going to learn from this. We have to learn from this. And there's actually two guys who keep saying a lot of the same things over. You have Onalfo saying, we're going to learn from this problem that we have early in the season, right? We're going to learn from these losses. And then you have Jermaine Jones saying, we have to talk as a team. We have to get on the same page. We have to do all these things after the game. And these both seem like broken records. What do you make of both of these guys?
Well, you're right. They keep saying the same thing, but I don't think they're saying the same thing. I mean,
right.
Jermaine continues to use the same words that he used. Jelle Van Dam jumped in on the same kind of topic after the Orlando game when he said, we have to look at ourselves. And then you have Onalfo saying we need to learn from this. Well, Onalfo said almost the exact same words after each of the 4 losses. Something went wrong. We have to learn from this. We're going to learn from this. We're going to learn moving forward. Well, when does that happen? It's 6 games into the season. And if you go back to the preseason, these guys have been together for, 3.5 months. When are those lessons going to take root? When are we actually going to see the fruits of that? The stuff with Jermaine and Jelle worry me a little bit more because those guys are team leaders. They're guys the younger players look up to. They're experienced. They've been around. And they keep talking about how the players have to talk things out, how they have to look at themselves and look inside the team. I don't know whether that means there are some guys that they are trying to highlight that are not putting in a full effort, or is it in fact, is it sort of a code to say, look, the coaching staff has not impressed us up to this point. The coaching staff cannot handle this. We're going to have to take care of this ourselves. And you can look at the words and make an argument that both those meanings could be accurate. That they could be addressing some problems with the coaching staff. They're not communicating correctly, or they could be addressing some of their teammates who aren't putting in full efforts.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that can go. I will take it from my view, my opinion of what I'm seeing between Jelle Van Dam and Jermaine Jones. We know that Jelle Van Dam is the captain. That's not how it's playing out that right now, at least not in my mind. Jelle Van Dam is not the captain out there. It's Jermaine Jones. Jermaine Jones is the captain. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know yet. I certainly think that Jones can rub people the wrong way. Maybe there's a reason that he's played on a bunch of different teams, over the last 3 years, 4 years. Comes back to MLS, goes to New England and Colorado, and now with the LA Galaxy. Maybe he's not the best teammate. I'm not getting that from him. I actually get some strong leadership vibes from him. I get less right now leadership vibes from Jelle Van Dam and sort of what he's doing. Jermaine Jones may be 35 years old, Kevin, but he certainly seems to be playing at 110% of what he can give. I'm not going to question that. He's a fiery guy, and he has been the guy. In Germany, not so much, but since he's come to the U.S. and New England, he was the the unrivaled leader. Same in Colorado. He may not always have worn the armband, but he was the guy that players fed off of and the guy that gave direction. Jelle's a little bit different of a leader. I see him as a great locker room leader, a veteran, a guy who keeps people up, and that's really important. That's a lot more important than you think when you have training and games every day for 9 months. It's really important that someone kind of keep everybody invigorated and inspired and having fun. And Jelle does that. Jermaine is a totally different guy. And we've seen that with the national team, too. Michael Bradley and Clint Dempsey are the leaders on the national team. But who's the guy that's running around yelling at people on the field? It's Jermaine Jones. And I think I agree with you. There's good and bad. You like to have that guy. You feed off that guy. Robbie Keane was a little bit like that. Right.
Robbie Keane was the guy that in training would get all over Giassi's artists and other players when they didn't live up to expectations. So there's a lot of good in that, but there can be a lot of bad if the criticism of stuff is so negative that it brings people down, especially young players. So I'm not ready to make a determination on how this is going to go, but I can see the very positive aspects of what Jermaine does, but then with a young team, I can see, him demanding things that some of these players may not at this point in their careers be ready to give, and that's going to lead to a negative vibe. Guys getting down on themselves.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a totally interesting dynamic. I will say that there may be some tension with the coaching staff too. I mean, I'm certainly not going to rule that out because, you and I have sort of talked about this before, but is there a leadership vacuum on the LA Galaxy? Is Jermaine Jones having to do most of the leadership and most of the coaching because Curt Onalfo and his coaching staff aren't doing it? There was a moment that was picked up by the Fox television cameras and the microphones there in Orlando, where Jermaine Jones in the 41st minute is screaming at Curt Onalfo. Now, from the best I can tell, and I don't have the exact transcript, and I'm guessing at what he's saying. I turned the volume way up. I put my headphones on. I did the best. But, I'm hearing Jermaine Jones yell at Curt Onalfo, he's not helping us, or it's not helping us, or there's definitely some frustration from Jermaine Jones going to Curt Onalfo. And when you sit there and you look, I mean, Kevin, everybody keeps asking us whether or not Curt Onalfo is, cut out for this job. I think I've said yes. I think Curt can do the job. But if you're going to have a guy on the field who knows more, who's more experienced, and who is actively taking the complete leadership role of the team, who's on the field, who's really coaching this team then? Is it Curt Onalfo and his coaching staff, or is it Jermaine Jones? And I'll be honest, I don't know that I'm against Jermaine Jones being that guy if there's results, but is this also, a thing that Curt Onalfo is not doing the job? I don't think that's the case, but there's frustration here. And who is Jermaine Jones yelling about? Is it Giovanni Dos Santos? I know a lot of fans have said that he's not doing the job, Kevin. Is it Jelle Van Dam, where those two are butting heads? I mean, there's a ton of things. I'll tell you this, in the moment leading up to that, the guy who was applying very little pressure at the top of the press was Giovanni Dos Santos, and the ball came down. Jermaine Jones ended up having to take a foul, basically because he got caught behind, and that's when he screamed at Curt Onalfo, saying, he's not helping us. So I think it's interesting.
I think there was some tension between Jelle and Jermaine for a short time. I think they've worked that out. And I think Jelle now seems to me is staying back and playing his position a little bit more, and that was Jermaine's problem. After the Dallas game and after the Vancouver game, that he thought that Jelle was trying to press forward too much when he should be taking care of his role as a center back. So I think that one is largely done. But and I don't want to cause any or be the spark to any controversy with Curt Onalfo. It's 6 games into the season.
Exactly.
Give the guy a chance. But again, with the Jermaine Jones thing, that goes one of two ways, and it can't go both ways. It's you look at that and you say, what a fiery leader, not afraid to take on his coach, really applying himself. He's into the game. Or you say, this guy should not be showing up as coach in front of everybody else. If you can hear it on TV, the guys on the sidelines can hear it, and so can some of the players. Whether he's right or wrong, it's the 41st minute. You're going to be at halftime in 4 minutes. You can't wait until you can get them behind closed doors and have a private conversation with them. Instead, it looks like he's showing up as coach. So again, we don't understand the whole context, but was he just being a fiery leader trying to inspire his troops, or was he being a guy that was second-guessing the coach and showing the coach up in front of the rest of the team?
Yeah, and you say, it can be seen one of two ways and probably not both ways. And you know what, Kevin? Probably the way that you view that, if you're a fan and you're watching this, is, are the LA Galaxy winning or are they losing? If they're winning, you take the positive side. If you're losing, you take the negative side. It is the Robbie Keane argument. Robbie Keane, known for gesticulating wildly, yelling at everybody. There was basically nobody that Robbie Keane couldn't yell at. And so he would yell at everybody, and that's fine when the LA Galaxy are winning MLS Cups and, the LA Galaxy are winning and everything's going fine and Robbie Keane is producing. As soon as Robbie Keane stopped producing, then his wild gesticulating arguments with everybody and at every time, then it's whining and nobody wants to hear it anymore. So again, all perspective of how you're looking at it, and you're absolutely right. 6 games in, we're not at a point yet to be able to sort of judge really where this team's at. I still have, this team is a question mark for me, Kevin. I have not, people keep wanting to go, what's up with this LA Galaxy team? And I don't know, shrug emoji, Kevin. I don't know. This team is a question mark.
Can I give you some numbers?
Yeah, go for it.
I did a little bit of research, and the Galaxy are two wins, 4 losses after 6 games, right? 6 points. Mm-hmm. That's the team's fewest points through 6 games since 2007. And I need to couch all this by saying small sample size, 6 games.
Okay.
But it's the fewest points through 6 games since 2007. Right now, there are only 4 teams in the Western Conference that have more than 2 wins. Looks pretty good. There are only 3 teams that have more than 8 goals, which is what the Galaxy have. Looks pretty good. And in the last 10 seasons, the Galaxy have won just 2 or fewer games. In the last let me try this again.
No
in
problem.
the last 10 seasons, the Galaxy have won just 2 or fewer of their first 6 games 4 times. Okay, so essentially 2 wins in 6 games as they have this year. On 3 of those occasions, they made it to the MLS Cup.
Right.
So that all looks pretty good. But then, on the other hand, this is only the second time in franchise history the team has lost 4 of their first 6.
Right.
The last time they did that was in 1997, 20 years ago. So is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? 6 points. They haven't been here for a long time. 2 wins. They have, obviously the difference is in those other years they had a couple of draws. 2 wins. They've been here before and they went on. So I don't know. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? Again, it's like the Jermaine Jones thing, right? You can make the argument on either side of the coin, and you can be right.
Yeah, and you can be right either way right now. That's sort of. I love how you played with my emotions there, Kevin. I was okay, that's horrible. Okay, that's better. That's okay, and then it's horrible again. So, good. Those numbers help me make no decisions on this team like is normal. It's interesting. I will say, we're talking about Jermaine Jones, and I was reading his post-game quotes. And one of the things that sort of sticks out to me, and it seems like it's a theme, it's a recurring theme here now, is he says, and I quote, "The important thing is don't listen to what the people outside are talking about. Just keep working hard. You know how the season can go. You saw Seattle last season. They hadn't played a whole good season, but at the end they won MLS Cup." All right, so that is Jermaine Jones. Jermaine is setting this up, and I think the Galaxy feel this way. I think from top to bottom the LA Galaxy feel this way, Kevin. It's them against everybody else. They're being treated unfairly from everybody, the fans, other teams, the leagues, the reporters. I know they feel that about some of the reporters, Kevin.
Yeah, some of I know that reporter.
Yeah.
Curt Onalfo said the same thing. He said, someone asked him about set piece defending, and he said, you guys are all going to point fingers. That's what you guys do.
Yes.
Obviously talking to the reporters in the room.
Yes.
There was only one LA reporter there, Adam Serrano, who works for the Galaxy. So I'm not quite sure whether that was, the royal we, meaning the media in general, whether that was meant for some Orlando reporters in the room that may have said or written something against the LA Galaxy, or whether that was sending a message. But, I've covered a lot of sports over a long time, and I have to say the Galaxy gets off pretty easy almost all the time. So if this little bit of a slow start has got them already, circling the wagons, it's going to be a really long season.
And the bottom line is Bruce Arena was known for his slow starts as well. Not necessarily losing 4 of 6, Kevin, but with Bruce, there was always that inherent trust from most people, although there certainly are a bunch of people who are happy to see Bruce leave immediately and everything else in between. So that's sort of, it's just interesting. I just find the setup and the way the Galaxy are sort of aligning themselves top to bottom in that everybody's against us role, that can work, though, Kevin. That can work for teams when they think that nobody's on their side. They think everything's going against them. That can sort of galvanize the team against this bigger thing and work in a positive way. So I can, So I can understand the tact. I'm not even disagreeing with it right now. It might be the way to go, especially with young kids, in order to motivate those guys. So anyway, that's my take on it. Anything else?
Yeah, I'll just say, just let me quickly, since it feels pretty obvious to me that I'm in the crosshairs of this Galaxy media attack, fake news or whatever you want to call it, and we can handle it. The LA Times got kicked out of the White House press briefing, so we can handle the Galaxy. But I will say, I have not failed to save a goal this year. I have not passed the ball to an opponent and led to a goal. I have not come off my line 35 yards to allow a goal. I don't think I've done any of those things this season. So, I guess my defense would be the team is 2-4. They have 6 points. They've never started out a season with 4 losses since 1997. That's all true. And if they want to challenge the facts, that would be fine. If they win the next 4 games, you better believe I'm going to be looking up the last time they won 4 in a row,
right,
and I'm going to be reporting on that. So, I think we just report on the results, and if they don't like the results, I don't think they should blame you or me or NBC or Fox or whoever it is. I think they should look at themselves.
Well, it is interesting. I know Curt Onalfo doesn't like to name names. That was even a thing whenever he was with LA Galaxy too. In terms of, I would ask him, about individual players, and he was very much against, talking about individual players. Yes, he would give you a little bit on somebody here, a little bit on somebody there, but as most, it was a team, sort of performance. And I feel he's carrying that over with, hey, I'm not going to throw my guys under the bus. And so far, he hasn't done that. But eventually, there has to come a time when punishment is doled out for things that have happened on the field. I mean, we've talked about João Pedro, and a guy, again, who was, MIA in this game and doing, I don't think, anything very positive throughout 90 minutes against Orlando. A guy who we've been saying needs to show something or he's going to sit. The same with Giovanni Dos Santos, though. I mean, same sort of line of thinking there is eventually he's got to do something, which, again, I thought Gio was a little more involved in that 25 to 30-minute run, involved a little early, but he disappears for long portions of the time. So eventually Onalfo's either going to have to throw somebody under the bus, which Bruce was very good at. He would pick and choose times to throw people under the bus. So either Curt is going to have to do that in order to get some results from these guys. He's going to have to start benching people so that way they understand there's consequences to not playing well. Some of that stuff has to happen. It has to be coming.
Well, I thought the game to do it was after Vancouver. I thought João Pedro and Diop should have sat, and they didn't. So you kind of wonder where the line is here. Where Curt Onalfo's patience is. I don't think he's going to publicly throw guys under the bus, and I actually like that about him. I think I've been around too many, coaches, and we can name some in recent memory here in U.S. soccer, who blamed everybody else but themselves.
Right.
Curt seems to be taking the blame, bringing it to himself, or at least not blaming the players, and that's kind of refreshing. However, I do think that players have to know there are consequences, and if the coach isn't going to name them in the press, then there has to be some accounting somewhere. Maybe he doesn't want to sit João Pedro and say he's not producing. Maybe he sits him and say he got a knock in training, or make up any excuse that he wants. I'm not encouraging lying to the media. I don't like that either.
Right,
but I do think if his approach is I'm not going to throw guys under the bus, I'm not going to publicly humiliate them, there has to be an accounting at some point that, you're not playing very well, and if you want to play, you're going to have to get better.
And it seems like maybe Jermaine Jones is a little frustrated by some of that. At least that was my take on what he said in the 40th minute yelling at Curt. So anyway, let's go on to Robbie Rogers. You tweeted out some stuff today, Kevin, about Robbie Rogers. It's stuff that you and I have been talking about on this podcast for a while now, but realistically, I think you're expecting that the LA Galaxy make some sort of move here fairly quickly. Before, I think it has to happen before May something, in order to put Robbie Rogers on the season-ending injury list. Because if that doesn't happen, the LA Galaxy are reasonably responsible for his entire cap salary on this year's cap, and it doesn't look like Robbie Rogers, timeline unknown, as I constantly say, is coming back anytime soon.
No, and actually, you deserve a lot of kudos. You've been on this story for a couple of months, and it is just now sort of entering its final days. What I do know is that last week, MLS and the Galaxy began talking about this. The Galaxy does not want to use the word negotiations. They think it's more straightforward, but they began talking about putting Robbie Rogers on this season-ending injury list. That's a list that allows them to recoup all of his salary because he's not going to play again this year. For the player, it doesn't mean they have to announce their retirement. So Robbie can go on this list and not make any decisions about next year going forward. I personally don't think he's coming back to play for anybody. I think he's going to retire, but he doesn't have to make that decision now, and that's pretty important for him. I do know that Robbie, the non-negotiation negotiations
right.
Are at an end stage. What they're waiting for now is for Robbie to see one more specialist, and for that specialist to make a recommendation. Is this guy really, can he really not play for the next 6 months? That will be done by Wednesday. That exam and that report will be filed by Wednesday, and then the league will make a determination late Wednesday or early Thursday as to what Robbie's status is. And this is significant because he's owed about $225,000,
right,
which would the Galaxy would get that back along with the money from Dan Kennedy. I know that you've been adding up all the spare pennies you've been finding around StubHub Center trying to sign Ibrahimovic. This money will go a long way toward that, although it's not going to happen. But anyway, that'll make it a little bit more feasible. I think Robbie took down all mentions of Galaxy off his social media last week. My understanding is he hasn't been out to StubHub to rehab for maybe a month, multiple weeks in any case. That doesn't mean much. He could rehab somewhere else, but he hasn't been around the Galaxy for about a month now. I think a couple things. The injury was a lot worse. Just to recap, he had surgery on December 22nd. It was his 8th surgery on his legs. After the surgery, he lost all feeling in his left foot. That has not returned yet. Doctors don't know why. Obviously, he can't play if he can't feel his foot. That's a pretty serious injury in soccer. So Robbie has an awful lot of other stuff going on. He just recently adopted a baby. It's 14 months old now. He has his clothing line. He has a lot of things going on, and I think if he looks at the Galaxy and says, look, they're Brian Rowe isn't playing. They've decided Nathan Smith is their future at right back. I think Robbie probably at some point looked at it and said, why should I kill myself to get back when I may not get that much playing time anyway? So I think a lot of things went into this. I don't think it was one thing. I think a lot of things went together. But we've had the feeling since February that Robbie wouldn't be coming back. He told me in February that he had considered retiring right after the surgery, and he spent about a week thinking about it and then decided to try to come back. And obviously the rehab has been very slow, and he's rethinking that decision. And the Galaxy probably at this point, having decided that Nathan Smith is their guy, they probably pushed him a little bit too. Like, hey, you know what? We got a month to get this done. Golly gee, why don't you just sit out the rest of the season and you'll feel a lot better next year? Right. I wouldn't be surprised if the Galaxy had a big voice in this too.
I mean, from a business standpoint, I can understand it from the Galaxy side. They want to recoup that salary. I mean, between Dan Kennedy and Robbie Rogers, $225 for Robbie Rogers, and I think about $185 or $180 for Dan Kennedy. So you're a little over $400,000. Or right around $400,000 to be able to spend, and that's a lot of money in MLS circles. Now, it's, in my opinion, not enough money to go internationally and bring in some big defender. And I think right now, if you're talking about positions in need, defensive midfield is sort of where the LA Galaxy need to look. Even with
John Terry's available.
Yeah, I saw that. That's please. Everybody's making that joke. Realistically, does everybody just have a collective short memory because Frank Lampard at the end of his career with New York City FC was scoring some goals and actually did something to sort of make that trade or that acquisition almost worth something? Because if everybody remembers, he didn't play for the first year of that contract because he was injured the whole time, and then he came on and he was healthy for a little while. He scored some goals, but everybody blames the Galaxy for signing Gerrard at the age, and him being on and off again, horrible and injured for the LA Galaxy. I mean, it just. I think the whole signing old players was MLS's thing, and I think they're done now. All right, and I think they're done with that for the most part. I think they're done with that. If you get somebody like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, which Kevin, you have said, long shot and not going to happen. All of those things. But
you love him. You've already picked out an apartment for him.
He can stay with me. He can stay with me here in the CoG Studios. So that way we can have constant. If that happens, if Zlatan comes and stays in the CoG, we're just going to have 24/7 live broadcasting from here. I'll quit my job. I'll do this full time. Me and Zlatan, he can hire me. So, but no, I mean, all those things. I mean, I think Zlatan can still make an impact in Major League Soccer. So, yes, it's an older player, but it's also an older player who's scoring a ton of goals in the English Premier League right now. So, it's only retirement.
Here's where that money makes Ibrahimovic possible, and I don't think anybody understands the intricacies of the MLS salary structure. It's just too Byzantine to really understand, but. This seems logical to me, and you know this way better than I do, and you can correct me where I'm wrong. But so they get back $400,000. Now, if you sign a designated player, he counts he's a maximum charge against the salary cap. So that means each DP you sign costs $480,000 against the salary cap. Correct?
Right. Yeah.
So that limits what you can do in other places. Well, now they got $400,000 back. That would mean if they sign an international player, as far as the salary cap is concerned, would that player then now only cost $80,000 because they have cap space, or is that not the way it works?
So it would work that way if the LA Galaxy didn't already have a full complement of three designated players. Because remember, Jelle Van Damme still is a designated player right now, so he is a full budget salary charge of the 480. Now that's going to end up being 480 divided by 2 because it's going to be prorated. But technically, the space on the salary cap for the designated player coming in is already there. All right. Okay. So you wouldn't have to do anything. So you don't need this to happen. If Robbie Rogers and Dan Kennedy, Kennedy retired, if Robbie Rogers goes up on the season-ending injury list, the LA Galaxy get full cap relief. Realistically, what they're looking at is being able to spend $400,000 under the cap. All right, because that's going to be a cap thing, but it won't have anything to do with designated players because the designated player spot is already being accounted for with Van Damme there. Granted, whenever you move Van Damme from a designated player down to a TAM player, which they have TAM, there's going to be some charge against the salary cap. So maybe some of this money goes to offset that charge because you're allowed to pay that down to a certain amount. I don't know what the Galaxy... Again, we only get told so much about how players are signed and how much of their salary charge you can take. Because if you really want to get into the weeds here, Kevin, a TAM player, I believe if you're a TAM player, you can't have your salary reduced by the amount of TAM money that is there by more than 50% of the charge, right? So basically, if you made $800,000, you can't reduce that player's salary to under $400,000, or it might mean that you can't reduce that to more than half of the full budget charge. So the 485 divided by 2, you can't pay it down more than that. I know MLS rules, but that's
yeah. You lost me at Ibrahimovic.
Yeah, so, I know.
You said there'd be no math. I promise.
That's right. That's what I said. So anyway, so this does free up about $400,000. This realistically for me tells me the LA Galaxy have a roster spot for a $250,000 to $300,000 a year player, which is a ton of money in Major League Soccer and cap space. If you combine those two, or basically you have two MLS type players at $180,000, almost $200,000 a piece that you can bring in two more guys with the rosters the way they are, with Robbie Rogers taking up a spot and Dan Kennedy was taking up a spot. That's two roster spots you've gained back, so you could realistically bring in two players, and then it's about where that money gets spent.
And remember, significant in all this, these are two veteran, not just the money. These are two veteran players that have been replaced as of right now by young players off the LA Galaxy 2 roster, and I think. We've been talking about this all season, but clearly the Galaxy template going forward has pretty much been laid.
It has, although I feel like if they continue to struggle like this and you get into that summer transfer window, they're going to have to go out and, they're going to have to get another designated player. They almost have to do that right now. There is no way they go through the summer without bringing in another designated player with how they're constructed right now. I can't see it. Because quite honestly, they don't have enough playmakers on the field. Giovanni Dos Santos, who's a designated player he's the highest paid DP on the LA Galaxy. He is not performing up to standards right now, and you can't afford to have a designated player not perform. I think we learned that last year, Kevin, with Robbie Keane and Steven Gerrard sitting on the bench. It's not something the Galaxy are going to want to deal with again, but at the same time, if they're going to finish in the bottom half of the Western Conference and in the bottom, quarter of MLS standings, if that's how this whole thing's trending right now, then they're going to have to do something. They're going to need to bring in a big name of some sorts in order to fill a hole of at least, hey, we're trying. We're spending money. We're going out there and trying to get these guys, because right now they're going to be pigeonholed with the fact that they went, let's say they were budget conscious on some of these players. And the guys they have spent a lot of money on, Roman Alessandrini, looks like he's going to pay off for them. That's great. But Joao Pedro, who they spent a ton of money on, Kevin, is not paying off right now. And that's going to force their hand in summertime for me, is they're going to have to do something that impacts the play on the field hugely.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because I'm going to say I don't know if they need to go out and get a big name, and I think management's going to look at this and say, who are our two best players right now? And they're probably going to say Jelle Van Damme and Romain Alessandrini. The guys that didn't have a high profile in Europe, that they got a little bit of a bargain. Remember, Alessandrini's making less than $2 million a year, and I know in MLS that's big money, but it's not Gerrard's $1 million money. So I wouldn't be surprised if they look at Ibrahimovic. Certainly they're going to look at him, and right. they're going to be players and big guys. But maybe the player they bring, I think the Galaxy is looking at this new style of bringing in sort of the Billy Bean style, Moneyball style of bringing in undervalued players and guys that come in and make a difference, and guys that want to be in MLS. And then Van Damme wants to be here. Alessandrini has saved his career by coming here. It was clear that Gerard, for example, was on his way out the door, and he wanted to, I'm not going to say he wanted to play for one more paycheck, but he knew that he was not here for the long haul. These other guys, they're in their 20s. Van Damme's older, but they knew that they had a chance to do something in the middle of their career to change things. So I think the Galaxy are going to kick tires on the big names, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did bring somebody over that it might be a guy that you have to go Google and find out a little bit more about.
No, and I don't disagree with that. I just think it's going to be worth some money. It's going to have to, granted, it may be $4 or $5 million a year, which is going to be a ton of money in terms of spending that, but it may not be on a name that, is this huge star, but they're going to have to show that they're trying to rectify a situation if this continues sort of the trend.
Right. Look at Lodero. I mean, that might be the kind of player they look at. A guy who came in, was a DP, was a talented player, had a little bit of notoriety, but again, was a guy that you had to look up. It wasn't a guy that you saw playing in the EPL on NBC every weekend. So, it could be, and Nicholas Lodero got the Seattle Sounders to the MLS Cup final. So if the Galaxy got a guy like that, that would be a pretty good signing.
Well, yeah, and that's rolling the dice, right? I mean, with anything, with Joao Pedro even, you're rolling the dice that you say that, the guy you're seeing is the guy who can fit into your team and make an impact. And if that doesn't happen in Major League Soccer, it's so huge because you're spending, this limited amount of TAM money or this limited amount of DP money or DP spots, and it doesn't pay off, it'll ruin your team. It can ruin your team, absolutely, and that's what you're seeing right now with Joao Pedro. One of the reasons I think that Joao Pedro hasn't sat yet, Kevin, is because they spent too much money trying to get him and lure him in and paid a transfer fee for him to come over. All of these things go into the fact that they don't want to give up on him right now, and so far I have seen, I'm going to say nothing. I have seen nothing from him, nothing very positive in almost anything that he has done on the field since coming on with the LA Galaxy. 6 games, some preseason games, all that stuff sort of in there. I've seen nothing that has given me any sort of feeling that it was a good decision to bring him into this team right now.
He's a guy 23 years old, never lived outside of Portugal. And I think another thing that's lost is he only played a handful of games in the top flight in Portugal. At least that's my recollection, my understanding. It wasn't like, Alessandrini played for a couple of teams in France. He moved around. He was part of the national team program for a while. Yes, he played only in France, but he was older. He had played in a number of different cities. He'd moved out of his parents' house. I think Pedro is a totally different thing. He's living in another country for the first time. Yes, his English skills are pretty good, but I think he brought some family members with him. But this is a big move for him. I think to step up, I would argue that MLS is probably better than the first division in Portugal. It's a much more physical league, and he's playing the most physical position on the pitch.
Right.
That's a lot for a 23-year-old guy to take in one fell swoop. Now, should the Galaxy have known all that? Maybe not. Maybe they saw some things that convinced them that this was going to be a smooth move. We could be having a totally different conversation about him later in the season. Frankly, I don't think we will be. I think it'll be the same conversation. But, there are some factors other than what we've seen on the field. I think there's some factors at home, how he's fitting in, just the move. There's a lot of things that are going on with him, and he's only been here, 3.5 months.
All right, well, it'll be interesting. Again, like you said, Joao Pedro, maybe we're having this conversation. It's completely different. We'll certainly have to sort of keep our eye on that one. Let's go on to just a quick news item because it came out today on Monday as we're recording. It's something that I certainly want to get into a lot more because I think it's really interesting. Kevin Hartman, former LA Galaxy legend goalkeeper, announced as and this is something Kevin and I knew about here for a little while, but Kevin Hartman announced as the Girls Academy Director. This is the brand new academy, a fully funded academy by Major League Soccer. It's the first and only girls' academy program to be fully funded by a Major League Soccer side. So it's the LA Galaxy. They're going to compete in the U14, U15, U16, 17, and U18, 19. So there's 4 teams there that the LA Galaxy are basically creating from scratch, the girls' academy program, and Kevin Hartman is going to be the main guy in charge. He is the girls' academy director. And so I hope to get Kevin on the show because I'd love to find out more about this. But just, Kevin, I'll give you my 2 cents on this real quick. You don't even have to comment on this because I want to get to some listener questions. But I I don't understand why the LA Galaxy are doing this, and people can say, what do you mean you don't understand how this happens? And this is my argument. If the LA Galaxy were going to start an NWSL team, I would say this makes 100% sense. This is a great step in the right direction. Can't wait to see what the LA Galaxy, women's team is going to look like, and that you're getting these girls started young and they can feed that NWSL team. That makes 100% sense in my mind, and I love it. But, and I've been told this many times, and I agree almost with the stance that is coming, that the LA Galaxy have no interest, as in zero interest in starting an NWSL team. The team that does have an interest in starting an NWSL team is LAFC, who have said that they are very interested in doing this, and more than likely they're going to do this. So, are the LA Galaxy realistically going to be developing these girls and giving these girls a great opportunity, to be in a fully funded academy system? Are they going to be given these, and then they're going to go play for LAFC, the NWSL side of the LAFC, because the Galaxy realistically won't have a place to put them? If they're looking to do this from a PR standpoint, then that makes sense to me. Why not do this and give these girls an option? But for a team, Kevin, for me, that is being budget-wise and budget-conscious this year, to go out and spend a ton of money in creating a girls' academy team and a girls' academy system, and putting somebody as well-known as Kevin Hartman in charge of that, I want to know what the end game is. Because the end game for me is an NWSL team. Go ahead.
Well, and you've already started this as your anti-feminist Josh Guesman self.
Exactly.
We're going to limit conversation here, but my sense is it all looks like the Galaxy are going to explore the possibility of a NWSL franchise. It doesn't make sense any other way. There's a lot of upside to this for the league, for women's soccer in general, for soccer in Southern California, and it does make sense for the Galaxy if they get their first and sort of box LAFC out. You're right. It doesn't make sense for them to develop players who then walk across the street and play for LAFC. But when you look at the upside for the NWSL, the upside for possibly for the Galaxy, this league is a totally different. The NWSL now is a totally different league financially than the league that the LA Soul played in back in the day. They disbanded in 2010 and they bankrupted. They were bankrupt in a lot of ways. I see a lot of ways in which this is a precursor to an NWSL franchise coming to the LA Galaxy.
Then you know what I say to that then? I say I'm 100% behind that, because that makes sense. If you're going to do this, if you're going to start a girls' academy team, have an NWSL team. 100% on board for that, and I think it should be done. I would like to see it. I want to see how successful the LA Galaxy can make an NWSL team, what they can do with this girls' academy, because I think that's the right thing to do. But if there's not going to be an NWSL team, which I've heard lots of things that say I have no interest in that whatsoever, then I question it. And that's the only reason I question it, is what's the end game.
And I know we're going to go way past an hour, so just get comfortable there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I just want to, I don't know that the LA Galaxy are going to have an NWSL team. No one's told me that. All I'm doing is I'm trying to connect the dots, and I'm saying that the NWSL is in its 5th season now. It's the longest-lasting women's professional league. It has a really good financial model in which the top players are paid by their respective federations, Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. What it doesn't have right now, it has one team in Piscataway, New Jersey, that just started this season, the Sky Blue. They moved from Rochester, I believe. They don't have a team in L.A., They lack teams in the major media markets. Piscataway, yes, is close to New York, but it's Piscataway. It's not New York City.
Right.
They don't have teams in the major media market. They don't have any teams in California. In Southern California alone, there are more young girls playing soccer than there are in about 47 or 48 states around the country. We have two tremendous college women's programs in UCLA and USC. USC, the defending women's national champions, had a number of players taken in the NWSL draft. So if the league is looking to grow, I think they look to LA, and I know that they just signed a TV contract in February where there'll be one game each week on the A&E network.
Lifetime, right? It's Lifetime? I think it's Lifetime,
yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I'm sure in those conversations, knowing a little bit that I do about TV, I'm sure in those conversations, one of the things that came up was, hey, you know what? You don't have anyone in LA. You don't have anyone in the large media markets. Why do we want to televise you on a national platform when essentially we're televising this to Portland or to Kansas City? You need to have a team in a major media market where you get people there interested. Again, the talent is here. The interest is here. The networks are probably pushing the league to go there, to come here. Why else would the Galaxy spend that money? And again, the financial model is totally different. The financial reckoning is totally different. You have problems where they're going to play. The StubHub Center is going to be hosting the Chargers as well as the Galaxy. I don't think they can add a third team there. Maybe they play in the track stadium. If they do this, it allows the Galaxy to sort of outflank LAFC. However, LAFC, one of their owners is Mia Hamm, and she has talked publicly about bringing a professional women's team here. I don't think you'd be the owner of one team and then assist another franchise in bringing a team here. So I'm just trying to connect the dots. If all that is true, it makes sense to me. I agree with you if it's just like, hey, we don't have a women's team. Let's spend a whole bunch of money with no end game in sight just because why not? Then that doesn't make any sense at all. I agree with you there.
That's my only my question is what's the end game? And so that's I'm sure we'll get to talk again. I want to have Kevin Hartman on the show. I've reached out to him already a couple times, and hopefully we'll get him on the show. We can talk about a bunch of things, including this girls' academy team and what they see is sort of the end game. I know I'll keep saying.
And the other girls' academies this one is fully funded by an MLS team. I think you get into some accounting issues. Orlando has a girls' academy. The Houston Dynamo has a girls' academy. Kansas City, Portland, they all have NWSL affiliates. The Pride in Orlando, the Houston Dash, right. The Portland Thorns. Now, whether they say it's not fully funded by the MLS team because the Portland Thorns are paying the bills, but, the Portland Thorns are kind of part of the same ownership group. So I don't know whether that's sort of sleight of hand or what, but you can't say the MLS teams that are affiliated with the Top Flight Women's Academy all have NWSL affiliates. Yeah. So the Galaxy would be the one that didn't have that. Again, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Good. See, you've already enlightened me on this particular. At least you're giving me some backup in that you're right that you feel like something there needs to be something at the end of this, and that's what it is. All right. We're gonna get to listener questions now. We have about 15 to 20 minutes left. Like Kevin says,
keep going.
I was gonna say we're going way past that. I tell every time before we record, and I tell this to people who tell me how much they enjoy the show, and we appreciate all that really positive feedback you guys give us, and that's why we do this, to try to keep you guys informed. But I always tell them, we start out with 30 minutes of talking, and it always ends up somewhere at like 60, 65 minutes. So we'll just continue to do that, and you guys have a ton of questions today. So let's try to just go through them. I know there's some of the stuff we've touched on so far, but we'll dive back in if we can provide a more pointed answer to your question. That's what we're going to do. So from Twitter, here we go. At Optimus E24, he says a lot of the front office and Onalfo hate/blame. Should the blame go to Klein, Vianis, Onalfo? Should we not expect a playoff run? So they're talking about the front office and where to point blame. And I was on Facebook sort of arguing about this as well, because a lot of people want to blame Curt Onalfo so far for the season. And Kevin, I'm not ready to point the finger at him, but I am willing to sort of understand that we have different areas or different buckets to place our blame for this LA Galaxy team now, because it's not one-person rule with Bruce Arena. Before, if anything was wrong, it was Bruce's fault. We all knew that, right? Because he was the general manager, he was the head coach, and he was the guy who realistically had a say in almost every decision the LA Galaxy made, okay? That's not how it is anymore. You have Chris Klein, the president, you have general manager Pete Vianis, and you have head coach Curt Onalfo. So far, for me, at least, Onalfo is playing the guys he's been given, and I think that he's been handed a short deck. I don't think he has all the cards in his deck, and that's, to me, is affecting these first 6 games so far.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, one thing I don't like about the current front office situation, and I'm going to be like Curt Onalfo here, and I'm not going to name names, but there's a limited number of people there. The front office was pretty cocky going into the season. They, under Bruce, you understood because of the success. This was a whole new template, and they went into the season thinking that they had reinvented the wheel. At one point, Chris Klein told me he likes this roster better than last year's. He thinks this is going into the season, that he looked at the players on the roster and liked this team better than last year's. And it was like, What are you talking about? Last year they started the year with Nigel DeJong and Ashley Cole and Robbie Keane and a healthy Giassi's artist. You like this team better? So there was a little cockiness going in. I think they're getting a lot of pressure from above them, from AEG and Dan Beckerman, and you saw what happened with the Kings when the Kings fell short. So I think that's where a lot of it's coming from. I don't blame Curt Onalfo. You know, they were winning that Vancouver game, and they could have, and maybe you could argue should have won that Vancouver game. They played really well against Portland with 10 men. They could have at least gotten a point out of this last game. So, you know, they've been within a razor's edge of having a really good record. So I think Curt Onalfo's gotten everything he can out of this team. But I think whether it's coming from Dan Beckerman, whether it's coming from just the StubHub Center, the people there have gotten together, decided they have made a decision, it seems to me, to go with the young guys. Curt Onalfo was the perfect choice to be the coach for the transition from LA Galaxy 2 to LA Galaxy. And if you say that, then I think you got to look at this and say, you know, Curt Onalfo was the perfect guy to lead that transition again, and he's done a reasonably good job. It's unfair to say, you know, this team isn't performing like the teams that had Robbie Keane on it before, or Healthy Giassi's artists the whole way. That's not what they're trying to accomplish with this team, and that's the way I look at it anyways. The other part of that question was, is it a playoff team? You know what? I think it has the ability. You see right now they're tied for 7th with Seattle, who's the defending champions.
Right.
They have the ability to sneak into the playoffs. They're not going to be a Supporters Shield contender, though.
I mean, listen, I think, like, you know, more than half the teams in Major League Soccer actually make the playoffs. So is this a playoff team? Sure. Why not? It could be a playoff team. Depends on how hot they get and whether or not they can ever put everything together. Because I don't think they're horrible all the time. I don't think this team is horrible for 90 minutes. I think this team starts slow, and certainly Jermaine Jones and Jelle Van Dam were commenting about the slow starts and how you have to be better, and they're saying how frustrating it is that the teams are starting slow because there's no excuse for not being ready for when the game starts. So I understand that. If you look at Curt Onalfo, he even talks about the Vancouver game where, you know, they win that game or draw that game if they defend better for 1 minute. And he's right, because they scored 2 goals in 1 minute, and if they defend better, you know, they have a better they should win that game. Realistically, that Vancouver game was a horrible result. Much worse than this Orlando result, which realistically I could see the Galaxy losing just in travel alone. So anyway, that type of thing is, you know, here on this show, we're going to try to help you understand that it's not just one person anymore. And that's, I think, is the hardest thing for LA Galaxy fans to sort of wrap their head around right now, is that, you know, I don't think you can blame Onalfo. He's playing the guys I'd be playing, quite honestly. Maybe I'd start benching Joao Pedro. Maybe I'd put Brian Rowe back there. I think those are the questions that you can throw at Onalfo. So if you think that the crux of these arguments are following, you know, Joao Pedro and Brian Rowe, and those are the guys that, you know, realistically you need to take Pedro out and put in, you know, Rafa Garcia or Baggio Husidic, and you need to take Diop out and put in Brian Rowe, then I think you have a legitimate argument for being upset with Curt Onalfo. If it's anything else outside that right now, in 6 games, I think that's a little unfair. I think you have to look at the front office first. So that's sort of where I sit on that. Let's go next question, because, again, we got lots of them. Our friends over at LA is Our House, the podcast, they say, after Jones's post-game comments of sit down and talking, should we be worried about locker room issues? And we've touched on this, Kevin. Is there anything else we can add to this to help people understand, you know, what we think about what's going on in that locker room?
I think there are clearly locker room issues, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It could be a good thing. But from what you talked about with Jermaine Jones yelling at Curt Onalfo on the sidelines, it sounds like this is starting to get to a real crisis point, because you don't want any of your leaders, any of your players, yelling at the coach in front of the other players on the team. But the fact that Jermaine has mentioned 3 times now, twice after games and once at a training session, that the players need to get on the same page and they need to have discussions and talk to one another, that tells me that there's some discord in the locker room, because clearly he feels, and I think Jelle's starting to talk about that too, voice some concern, that the players are not on the same page. And does that mean strategically they don't agree with the tactics? Does that mean they're not putting in a full effort in training or in games? Does that mean they're not applying themselves? We don't know what it means just yet, but clearly there are some players in that locker room that are not happy with the way things are going.
All right, we go to our next question, and we go to Sev. And Sev says, and a good friend of the show here, he says, does Gio's lack of touches have anything to do with Jermaine Jones infiltrating his playing space, making it easier for defenders to stop LA's attack? Are we having player space issues again between Alessandrini, I'll throw another name, Alessandrini, Jermaine Jones, and Giovanni Dos Santos?
Well, ideally, you want Gio and Zardes hooking up in the middle of the pitch, and you want Alessandrini to stay wide. But I think the problem is Alessandrini has found a lot of success just charging right in the edge of the box, right up the gut, right up the middle. And Gio's given him that space. So Alessandrini's going to take it and he's going to score, and that leaves them weak on the flank. I think right now Alessandrini is playing his role and Gio's. And I think there is a problem bringing the ball up to the midfield. I think this was supposed to be Gio's team, and somebody asked me, what do you mean about Gio's team? He was the guy. He was going to be the big donkey. He was going to be the leader of the team, the way, say, Clayton Kershaw is with the Dodgers or Kobe Bryant was with the Lakers. He was going to be the guy that led the team and inspired the team. And, you know, you see him just giving space away and letting Jermaine have it and letting Alessandrini have it rather than fight for it. And if Gio does his role and Jermaine can, as Jermaine has said, we have players that are not doing their role, and maybe perhaps he's talking about Gio in that too. If Gio pushes forward and plays a playmaker role, Jermaine can stay back in central midfield and help bring the ball up, and then everything changes. Alessandrini stays out on the wing, and the Galaxy become a lot more dangerous. But I do think that Gio has given away his role in the central midfield, whether players have taken it from him or whether he's just given it up. But I mean, think about that. If Gio is up front hooking up with Giassi, that means Jermaine can bring the ball up and doesn't have to play that offensive role that Gio vacated. That means Alessandrini can stay wide, or he may not be as effective, but the team will be more dangerous. A lot of things happen, and they're not happening because, in my mind, Gio is not being aggressive and forcing himself into the positions where he needs to get.
Yeah, somebody said, that they should, should the LA Galaxy force Romain Alessandrini to stay outside? And I said, because they were worried about the people taking up Gio's space. And Kevin, my argument here is, if you're scoring goals, you get to take that space. I don't care who you are, that is your space because you're commanding that space. So for me right now, to say that you're going to push Romain Alessandrini anywhere is ludicrous, crazy, and scary. Because you have a guy who scored 4 goals in 4 games. You have a guy who is realistically one of the only reasons the LA Galaxy are anywhere near, and I'm going to use competitive in quotation marks right now, because I feel like they have competed in a lot of these games. They competed in the Orlando game, realistically in a game that they probably should have been out of if not for the post and some lucky stuff that went there. They played well in moments, and Romain Alessandrini has been the driving force of scoring goals and being that offensive guy. People want to say Jermaine Jones should hit the bench, and I have to point out that Jermaine Jones scored a goal. He's had some great assists. All right, his assist to Alessandrini in this game is a perfect example of that because he bypassed Gio in order to get the ball into Roman, who was sort of in that attacking role up top, up above the box, and he scores a goal from there. To me, Jermaine Jones isn't the problem unless you want to start pointing to, defensive-wise, is Jermaine Jones getting sucked too far forward? And you and I have talked about this. To me, Joao Pedro needs to do a better job of backstopping Jermaine Jones so Jermaine Jones can go forward.
Right. Jermaine Jones' problem is he's having to be Gio and he's having to be Joao Pedro, and he's not being fully successful in either role because he's playing 3 positions. He's playing his position and he's having to make up for those guys' lack of effort or lack of performance. So it's hard to blame Jermaine Jones. But you're right, Alessandrini is totally effective in the middle. But I would like to. I just think if he stayed out wide, because Gio, a guy who scored 15 goals last season, if he got hot and sucked up some of the defenders in the middle, Alessandrini becomes effective from the outside. I don't want to put all the blame on one guy, but it does seem like Gio's forcing Jermaine to do a lot of extra things. He's forcing Alessandrini to charge in, which he's been totally effective. But again, if you had a guy like that on the outside, defenders have to play wide. That would set things up in the middle. Zardes would be more effective. I think there's a lot of things going on, and a lot of it stems from what's happening right in the middle of the field.
And you look at this, and the perfect example of, what happens if you could keep Roman Alessandrini out wide, Kevin, is there was a play in this game that Giovanni Dos Santos had a touch in, that Bradford Jamison IV had a touch in, that got the ball to Jermaine Jones, who was centrally and pushed forward. Giovanni Dos Santos originally started this. So you had all these things that were pulling people away from Roman Alessandrini, who was wide open on the wing as Jermaine Jones laid the ball into the box and should have scored. Roman Alessandrini in this particular case. So you can see how that dynamic works. And I forget which minute it was, but realistically, it was in the 80th minute. Dos Santos to Bradford Jamison, Jamison to Jones, Jones out wide to Alessandrini, and he skied it over the net. So that was realistically a chance that should have been converted, but you can see what happens when Gio is involved in that play. It pulls people away from Alessandrini, who was wide open over there. So that...
And it opens up the middle, it opens up the wings, and by the way, you mentioned we had a Bradford Jamison sighting there.
That's right.
When I saw him come in the game, my first thought is, where's Ari Lassiter? Remember how effective he was in those first two home when he came in and he had the like three dangerous chances in about 30 seconds, and I don't think we've seen him since then, have we?
I think Lassiter had been injured. All right, so
okay.
that was not anything I confirmed, but I believe somebody told me that, and I wrote it down and didn't do a whole bunch with it. But yes, Bradford Jamison comes into this game. It's just, on my live show on Thursday. One of the callers called in and said, you look at who the Galaxy are bringing off the bench, and it's not scaring anybody. You bring in Bradford Jamison IV, which, with all due respect, he's a young kid. He's 20 years old, I believe. He's not scaring anybody. He has pace. He can scare people. I think he has an ability to do something with the LA Galaxy, but he's not scaring. I mean, realistically, Emmanuel Boateng was supposed to come off the bench. So lots of things have happened, in recent times that you look at and say, hey, if there weren't injuries, that type of thing. But the Galaxy don't have anybody off the bench. They don't have an Alan Gordon, realistically, that's going to come in and, change it up. They don't have Emmanuel Boateng because he has to start. It's just interesting to sort of chart what the Galaxy have and the depth issues, I think, that we've talked ad nauseum about. All right, go next one. We're going to the next question. Let's see. At Rogue Leader LA says, with Rogers and Kennedy freeing up money, where should the LA Galaxy spend it? Kevin, 2 words. Where should the LA Galaxy spend their money?
On players.
On players. There,
2 words.
That works. Striker, you could say realistically offense. You could say midfield. You could say defense at this point. Almost any place wouldn't be a horrible thing. Raul wanted to chime in and see. It says, thoughts on playing Gio as an attacking mid, which basically he has been playing for a while now. I don't know that we have to dive into it all that much more than we've already talked about it. I got this one. This is another one from Sev, but it certainly was something that brought up a lot of issues, I think, from fans. And they said, Sev asked, do you think it was a mistake for Fox to mic up Curt Onalfo because he didn't sound confident and managerial on his sound bites? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it wasn't a mistake for the network to do it. The network, if that's what the network got out of it, that's a great get. It may have been not the brightest idea for the Galaxy to agree to that, or maybe they didn't have a choice.
I don't think they had a choice.
I actually, they probably didn't have a choice. I actually didn't come away feeling that. I have to say I wasn't listening to every word of the broadcast, so I didn't come away feeling that. But it does. If we hadn't had that audio, a lot of this podcast would have been different, because we've talked a couple of times about whether people in the locker room are starting to question the coach, and a lot of that speculation is based on what we heard or what you heard in the broadcast on Saturday. So yeah, in that sense, maybe it wasn't the brightest thing for the Galaxy to agree to do. But on the other hand, Curt Onalfo knew that he was mic'd. He had to be aware of that, and maybe at that point it was up to him to sort of play a different role. He's on TV. Play a different role. Maybe cup the mic when you want to say some of these things. I don't know.
No, I mean, for the most part, there's nothing on there. There's nothing realistically from that audio, from the Curt Onalfo audio. There's nothing on there that even makes me raise my eyebrows or say, oh, that wasn't very managerial. So I'm in disagreement with Seb almost 100%. And the other thing is, I went back and listened after I got this question. I went back and listened to Bruce Arena and his mic'd up stuff, and Bruce doesn't say anything either. You don't get anything from these guys. That's just not the way it is. And for the most part, any of the stuff they have to put out or that they can realistically clean up enough to broadcast isn't going to be that interesting, because all the interesting stuff usually has swear words in it. So,
well, let me just follow up on that.
Yeah.
Curt Onalfo is not, he's been an MLS coach before and with 2 franchises, and this is not his first rodeo. he is not deer in the headlights on this stuff.
Nope.
Things are not working out. Probably this is not the way he drew it up, but he's not a deer in the headlights guy. And I think what's hurting him is the laudable fact that he does not want to criticize any of his players, and he's taking all this on himself, or he's using vague terms like, we have to get better, we have to learn. Like, again, he's used that after all 4 losses. It sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about. It sounds like he hasn't really come to a conclusion about anything yet, but what he's trying to do is protect his players. And I think we should salute him for that, and not criticize him for that. But for people that think that maybe he feels like he's in over his head, or again, the deer in the headlights, or he doesn't know what he's doing, that's not the sense I get. The one thing is protecting his players has left him a little bit more exposed and opened him to this criticism. And my guess would be if you told him that was the trade-off, he'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I see that. I also see the fact that realistically, we didn't get any magical words out of Bruce Arena half the time either. I just don't think you can take what players or what coaches say after games 100% to the cash register there. You can't cash in on these things that they're saying. Every once in a while, you get a really in-depth sort of look from these players or coaches when they say something, Kevin, but most of the time it is just straight out of Bull Durham, one game at a time. God willing, we'll keep winning, or we'll keep doing things. It's boilerplate stuff, and Onalfo has filled that role the same as Bruce Arena, but just with not as much attitude, I think, is basically what.
And then when
across.
A player doesn't use the Bull Durham stuff, when he's colorful like Jermaine is, then we sit here and parse every syllable to find out what he's talking about.
Exactly, that's how it works. All right, here we go. Jason at Jason Sold the War. I really, realistically, I do not like Twitter handles at all. You guys make me work way too hard. Jason writes in, he says, with the JJ and JP combo, so Jermaine Jones and Joao Pedro combo, clearly not working out, who steps into their place? And if no one can step into it, who should the LA Galaxy sign to fix it? I think that Rafa Garcia, quite honestly, the guy who was at right back and couldn't make that stick, and it looks like it's Nathan Smith back there, much to some people's chagrin, because, of course, there's Rafa Garcia people who are now saying Rafa Garcia should play right back instead of Nathan Smith there, Kevin, because that's Twitter, and that's soccer Twitter, and that's the LA Galaxy. But if Rafa Garcia comes in and plays defensive midfielder for me, I'm okay with that. Let's see how that works. Do you get anything more from Baggio Husidic coming in there and trying to play a defensive midfield role? Because for me, I'm not willing to take Jermaine Jones off this field, because nobody, and I mean almost nobody, has shown any sort of creative attacking acumen besides Jermaine Jones. He's the guy who's getting these assists, and he's the guy who's at least creating some of these chances for me.
I bring in Husidic for a couple of reasons. Rafa Garcia is a good player. He's going to be a good player for a long time. But one of the things I think Jermaine Jones is suffering with a little bit, and when you, again, parse his words, as we talked about, parse his syllables, one of the problems he may have with Joao Pedro is he's a young guy that hasn't seen everything yet, and Jermaine has. Jermaine's played on 2 continents, and he's played for a lot of different teams. So I think having another veteran there, another guy who probably comes onto the field with Jermaine Jones' respect already in his back pocket. Not that Jermaine doesn't respect Rafa, but it's a different thing. This is a veteran guy who's been around. I think the pairing with Jermaine would go better from the get-go with those two. Now, Jermaine may warm up to Rafa, and they may have some great chemistry, but I think if you're trying to look to stop the bleeding right now, to sort of patch up the wound before you go forward, I think Baggio's a better choice simply because of that veteran factor, the fact that he's seen some of these things before, that he knows how to react to crises maybe a little bit better than a younger player does.
Yeah, it very well could be. And again, I am less critical of Jermaine Jones than I think a lot of people are. At least that's how I read it on Twitter. There are a bunch of people who want him off this team because they think that he's not doing his job. And for me, it's been Joao Pedro not doing his job that's caused Jermaine Jones to be out of position. I don't know. Maybe I'm making excuses. Maybe I'm that guy who just makes excuses for every player except the ones I don't like, because I've certainly been accused of that, but I don't see it that way.
I think we saw that with the national team too, though. People were very critical of Jermaine, and in some cases, in many cases, it turned out that he was actually having to do his job and Michael Bradley's, and it looked like Jermaine couldn't decide what role he wanted to play, and he was forcing Bradley out of position. I think in retrospect, it turned out to be that he was trying to carry Michael Bradley a little bit. Michael Bradley has really rebounded very well under Bruce Arena, and we've seen the national team have a lot of success. But Yeah, I think the criticism of Jermaine may be a little bit unfounded. It may prove to be correct in another couple of games, but it seems to me that he's trying to do Gio's role when Gio's not stepping up, and he's trying to do João Pedro's role when João Pedro's not backtracking quick enough. It's very tough for a 35-year-old guy to have to play three positions in one game.
I will certainly blame Jermaine Jones for not being able to body Kyle Laren off the ball, and I will blame Jelle Van Dam for not switching with Jermaine Jones to be able to body Kyle Laren off the ball on that last one. And then I want to blame Diop for not coming off the line in that particular case because the ball was right on the 6-yard line, 6-yard box to be able to punch that out. So just in case you thought I just like blanket statement, I love everybody, I don't. I can blame lots of people for lots of things, and Jermaine Jones has some culpability in that, but I'm not willing to throw Jermaine Jones out with the bathwater right now.
I wrote right after on Twitter, that, hard to blame the defense for that. I thought it was just a really great goal by Laren. I'm going to walk that back a little bit. Yeah, Jermaine could have done a little bit more, but he was right on the guy. Laren got his foot out there, and Jermaine said afterwards that he actually thought the ball was going to be deflected, and it looked like it would have been. There were a couple defenders right in front of him, and it looked like they went up and just missed the ball. Jermaine should still be playing as if the ball is going to come through. So, yeah, I don't blame Jermaine totally for that. He was right on the guy, but the guy did get the foot out in front of him, and that's what Jermaine should have been watching for. I'd like to know a little more about how Diop was feeling. If you remember, he was hurt just before that and looked like he should have come out of the game. And he's an extremely aggressive goalkeeper. And so for him to stand there on the line on a corner kick is way out of character, and I'm wondering if this is one of those things where, and I wrote this on Twitter at the time, he may be hurting the team by trying to take one for the team, by trying to be, the big tough guy. He may have actually hurt the team if, in fact, he was too injured to come off his line there.
And therefore, you can launch criticism at Curt Onalfo if he allowed Diop to stay in that game knowing that he was hurt. Now, granted, Diop can lie. The trainer and Diop have to do that, but if you're Onalfo and you see that Diop is limping as much as he was, and you see maybe in the minutes after the injury that he's not, do you make that switch? And that's always tough. Listen, that's going to be a tough call for any coach.
There's two things on that. One is, was he physically able to come off his line?
Right.
I think it was a twisted ankle or knee or something. The other part was, does he want to, after just getting his clot cleaned, does he want to dump into a whole bunch of big bodies again? Normally, you don't even question that with Diop. He's a very physical, agile, talented, athletic goalkeeper. So it was so out of character on both ends, not coming off the line and then not jumping into the scrum. You just wonder.
You wonder. Lots of people wonder. That's what soccer Twitter and LA Galaxy Twitter is all about, is wondering about this team. All right, let's see. I want to give some shout-outs. I got to do some. These are some really excellent. First of all, we got an email from Lisa K. And Lisa says, hey, Josh, we need a long-term replacement for Rogers that is not named Smith or Garcia. See, Kevin, I told you there are lots of people who hate on Nathan Smith already. So not a fan of the Smitty. That's okay. Galaxy, and here comes Lisa, and Lisa's about to drop knowledge, so everybody pay attention. The Galaxy have until May 8th to move Rogers to the season-ending injury list and replace him with someone that makes no more than he does, around $220,000 according to the 2016 salary list, at no extra charge to the cap. Unless Rogers and the club have come to terms on a retirement that would give cap relief, it is stupid not to do this because Rogers is not coming back this year. If Galaxy don't want to be on the hook for a long-term contract, maybe a one-year loan would work. What do you and Kevin think, by the way? I got this reading the roster rules. Lisa went to the roster rules and read it and just dropped. There you go. So you want to be smart, go read the roster rules, Kevin. For me, I need to go read the roster rules again and double check everything, but Lisa's 100% on this one. This looks like it's perfect, but realistically, she's saying she wants a right back. Even a one-year loan that she says she'll be happy with. Just real quickly, what do you think with Smith Garcia and a replacement for Robbie Rogers? And obviously, we've already talked about Rogers.
Well, they could definitely use another player there just for depth, if for nothing else. But, when you look at the Diop thing, when you look at João Pedro getting, run out there every game, and you look at Nathan Smith, and I think Nathan Smith, it seemed to me, watching the replay, got beat on that first goal. I don't know what you thought. In Orlando, looked like he was the guy that got lost on that play. But I think it just seems to me that they're committed to playing the young guys. They're committed to playing the Galaxy 2 guys. And so going out and getting somebody long-term would be a mistake because eventually the Galaxy 2 guys are going to be the guys who are going to play. And short-term, that means you're taking playing time away from the guy that you're trying to bring along. So, yes, they could use a guy, but from the way that I have interpreted their philosophy this year, I don't see them doing that because I think they want to live or die with the young guys, let the young guys make their mistakes and learn rather than have them sit on the bench and say, watch this guy, watch what he does.
Yeah, I mean, with Nathan Smith, for me, yes, I agree. I think he was at fault. I think he was caught going forward a little bit too quickly because if you watch that play and you track him the whole entire time, once Gio starts pressuring the ball, Nathan Smith wants to move forward, which is fine if you want to do that, but he can't move forward at a pace that is going to eventually leave Will Johnson all by himself over there. And he's young. He's going to make these mistakes. He's 22. He's playing in Major League Soccer for the first time. You expect this from him. I will also say that the back line at the time that Smith got caught was made up of Ashley Cole, Jermaine Jones, and Giassi Zardes were the four players. So Smith, Cole, Jones, and Zardes are the four players back there. I can say that maybe if you have the other four players, which is like Steras, you have Jelle Van Dam, who was caught up the field as well. If you have guys like Ashley Cole out there, and so you have that four back line, maybe that back line moves faster than those four players. But for me, it's Smith not understanding the situation and getting beat. I'm sorry, Lisa. I'm going to disagree. I think that I'm with Kevin on this one. I don't think the Galaxy are going to go out and find a right back right now. I think Smith is that guy. I think Garcia is going to be his backup. And as much as I don't appreciate the fact that the LA Galaxy are so thin at that position, I do not think that they're going to bring anybody in. I do, however, think that, and she is right on her main point here, that Rogers going to the season-ending injury list. And I would like to say that Lisa sent me this email before you made your announcement, Kevin. So she was on top of this stuff even before you put it out there. So big props to Lisa, and she sent in an email via our website, so cornerofthegalaxy.com. Go to contact us or about us, and you can write out a contact form there and do it. Also want a big shout out to Brian in Huntington Beach, who wrote us a 4 or 5 paragraph email and really has touched on a lot of things that we did as well, just in terms of different players and sort of where they stand. All right, last question before we go. Got 2 questions from
before we go into Lisa,
ahead.
she totally schooled us on the whole contract thing. That was
there you go.
I'm embarrassed. I feel like Giovanni Dos Santos looking for a through ball.
Okay, so here's my one horrible. I'm really good at these dad jokes, right? I mean, that's realistically. And I was in Colorado this weekend visiting my son. I went to go see Colorado play RSL, by the way, in a game, just in case anybody was listening. Which RSL scored 2 late goals to win that game. It was a very interesting game. Just sort of doing my scouting on Western Conference opponents there. Both of those teams don't look like they're very good, and I'm not sure the LA Galaxy could beat either of them. So that's sort of where we're at. Although they did beat RSL, so that's sort of not here or there. But the LA Galaxy put out a press release today talking about StubHub Center. They're doing this initiative and community service all throughout the week, and you can go on their website, lagalaxy.com, to read all about it. All right, but one of the things they're talking about is how green and energy efficient StubHub Center is, and it was clearly a press release put out by StubHub Center, and they said that one of the things they did was put motion detectors on LED lights. And Kevin, and I know our listeners and the fans of the LA Galaxy know that the LA Galaxy have LED lighting for the stadium. I think the only MLS team to have LED lighting in their stadium, and so it's different. And so I was like, so in just a brief second, I said, hey, does that mean that they put motion detectors on the lights for the stadium? And clearly they didn't. That wasn't the thing. But it was just this melding of things. So I said, so if they did put motion detectors on the main field stadium that kept the LED lights on, would Giovanni Dos Santos keep those lights on during a game? Because he'd have to be moving, and would that happen? Yes, yeah. Yes. There's my bad joke.
You took that away. I was going to go with maybe they should put those motion detectors on some of the players. Yeah, I was going to do Curt Onalfo. I wasn't going to name anybody. I was going to say maybe they should put motion detectors on some of the players to see if they move.
Bad dad jokes right here at Corner of the Galaxy from the Box. That's what you can expect from us from the rest of the season. But we have one more. Can we get our last question?
I was just with LED light, with that whole thing that you just laid out. Alessandrini could probably light a city the size of Las Vegas with as much as he moves, though.
He does. If you could harness that power, Kevin, if you could harness it, you could power some cities. That's for sure. All right, let's go. 2 questions, same 2 people, same question, I should say. Kevin writes in and he says, do you think the LA Galaxy atmosphere should be better? The Orlando fans were really loud and had passion. And then KJ, good friend of the show as well, she writes in saying this isn't her question, but she had it for somebody else, and she said, why can't the Galaxy have atmosphere like other clubs? Would love to hear the discussion from you and I. So Atmosphere has been a big thing that's been going around Twitter and Facebook and everything else, and people are certainly questioning the atmosphere at StubHub Center compared to places like Atlanta, Portland, Seattle, Orlando, Sporting Kansas City. I'm sure there's some other ones. Even New York City has a bigger atmosphere than the LA Galaxy have, and I personally, Kevin, struggle to find a good answer for this that doesn't evolve around the fact that I think in Los Angeles that they watch sports differently than a lot of places around the world. And that's not what people want to hear, by the way.
No, but it's true. I mean, if you look at a Dodger game compared to a Cub game or a Red Sox game, it's totally different. The Lakers, the idea of the Laker game is to be seen, not heard. So you want to be down close to the court. The Angel games, holy cow, you go to an Angel game, it'll be 43,000 people there, and you can hear a pin drop even in the bottom of the ninth inning. So it is different. It just simply is. And I don't know why that is. LA is a market like when I lived in Miami. It was very similar in Miami. They're markets where people come from other areas. And so maybe you have 40,000 people in the stadium, but they're all cheering for different teams.
Right.
If there's two teams, there's 20,000 for one and 20,000 for the other, cheering for the opponent, and so maybe you don't have that volume of noise. I don't think that's the excuse at StubHub Center. I will say, though, that my boss, Angel Rodriguez, the sports editor at the Times, when he came here, he said that he had gone to a lot of games in Washington, D.C. and other places, and he was stunned at the same thing, stunned at the atmosphere. He had heard so much about the Galaxy and how successful the organization was, and he went to a game, and it was very quiet, and he was really surprised by that. I think I've heard one excuse is that the Galaxy has 3 supporter groups, and they don't seem to get along that well, and so rather than working in unison, they're kind of at times fighting each other. That may be part of it. I will say, though, that the Orlando atmosphere was awesome. I've been to Portland. I was lucky enough to go to a game in Portland. It's tremendous. I've been to several games in Seattle. Was tremendous as well. Colorado, did not impress me. Dallas did not impress me. Small crowds in both places, by the way, for good teams. Or good teams last year anyways. Kansas City, a long string of sellouts. I didn't come away from there with my ears bleeding. I don't remember a whole raucous scene there. So, certainly the Galaxy not on the top of the list as far as atmosphere goes, but I don't necessarily, it's nowhere near the bottom in my mind.
And I agree with that. I will say from personal experience, just having going to a couple Colorado games, that the Galaxy atmosphere is far more livelier than a Colorado game, and quite honestly, I'd expect that from the difference between those teams. I don't have an answer. There's lots of people who want to blame the Galaxy for not creating or fostering that atmosphere, and I can understand it to a certain point. I think that there are some things that, perhaps they could do better. That's fine. And lots of you guys have a way better answers than I'm going to have for you. But I'll tell you right now that it is, it's an entertainment place. And here's the thing, and this is what's going to make everybody really mad, Kevin, is that LAFC is building their brand new stadium in downtown LA, more or less. We'll call it downtown LA. We'll give them the tip of the hat on that. Right next to the Coliseum, they're going to have a stadium that is going to be very conducive to, I think, supporter culture and what they're going to do. They're going to really push for that. And I think that in the first year or two, depending on results and depending how things go, that they are going to have an atmosphere that will rival realistically what happens in Orlando and Portland and some of those other places. I think at least at the beginning that's going to happen. And I think that for the LA Galaxy, in 1996, if you saw their first game at the Rose Bowl and how many people came to that game and you saw that atmosphere was there because it's new, it's shiny, and it's going to attract people who think that this is their team and they're going to be passionate about it. And it's going to be a place to go to as well. Go ahead.
If you've never been to a game in Seattle and Portland, and this just not for you, Josh, for anyone out there, even if the Galaxy aren't playing, you really owe it to yourself to go there. One of the things that really helps them, and I don't know much about the new Orlando stadium, but I'm guessing it's similar. There are a lot of bars and restaurants right around the stadium. You take public transportation to both stadiums. You get there early. You go to the bar restaurant. You have, you don't necessarily have to drink. I'm not telling you to drink, but you can have dinner. You can meet people. You can join up as a group. Then there's the March to the Stadium, which in Seattle is amazing. It's like the Rose Parade.
I've seen it.
They have that in Portland. I believe they have that in Orlando. So there is it becomes a social event. With the StubHub Center, I know they have tailgating there, and I know that the U.S. national team fans, that they have come there and they've done marches to the stadium and stuff. It's not organic, though, as it is in those other cities. And part of the reason is where it's a suburban stadium with no public transportation anywhere around. There's no bars or restaurants there to congregate hours ahead of the game to get fired up. LAFC's new stadium has that. If you've ever been to a USC game, there's plenty of places there. There's good parking. You can congregate in Exposition Park and march over. In Seattle, you have that. In Portland, you have that. We don't have that in LA, and that, I think, I would say that has a lot to do with creating the atmosphere, that the ability to take public transportation, get there a couple hours early, meet with your friends, discuss the game, and then march over to the stadium fired up. Here you drive 45 minutes in your car, listen to NPR, you park, and then you walk into the stadium. It's not the same. Alone, it's not the same thing.
Here you drive 45 minutes in your car, listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast, and then
that's what I should.
That's what you had the perfect chance. And thanks, Kev. Under the bus. That's fine. Listen, I know we've gone long today, and part of that is because there's lots of stuff that you guys wanted to talk about, and we're always willing to do that. And on this particular issue, the support issue, and how the LA Galaxy or how anybody can sort of foster that type of, I'm open to suggestions. I am of the opinion that I do not have the answer. I'll tell you one thing, that regardless of where LAFC plays or the LA Galaxy play, it's difficult to get anywhere in Los Angeles. And if you want to argue with me about that, we can have discussions about me driving for my job around LA all the time and how I get stuck in traffic in the middle of the day, and it's hard to get anywhere at any time. So there's lots of things that factor into this, and even LAFC is going to have problems with traffic and different things that are going to have happen. Whether or not it's around a city center and a downtown center, and whether or not that drives people, and maybe that's what happens in Orlando, and maybe that's what happens in Portland and Seattle. Those are all downtown stadiums. I can understand that. So maybe it's just a different aesthetic. You look at Chicago, which is out in the suburbs, in a much more suburb place than even Carson is, and they don't have it. So I'm open for suggestions. Please write in and tell us what you think. I don't pretend to be an expert on this particular thing at all. So send us your suggestions at Corner of the Galaxy, cornerofthegalaxy@gmail.com. Go to our website. You can do that, or at Galaxy Podcast. Any of those things work. All right, Kevin, we talked.
Can I break some news before we go?
Oh, yes, you can.
Speaking of the National Women's Soccer League, I just got a press release. Mallory Pugh is leaving UCLA to turn pro. You remember Mallory Pugh, the youngest player to ever score for a U.S. national team when she was a teenager in Colorado, played in the Olympics. Mallory Pugh leaving UCLA to turn pro. She could be the first signing of the LA Galaxyettes or whatever they're going to be.
If the LA Galaxy had an NWSL team, Kevin, she could be that person to kick off realistically what could be something. I want to see something coming out of this girls academy thing. That is like my number one thing I want to see now from the LA Galaxy is whether or not they put the end game here. All right, Kevin, anything else?
I'll repeat that. That's the female chicharita.
That's right. That's how it works. All right. If you're looking for Kevin on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11. If you're looking for me on Twitter, at JGuesman, JGUESMAN, at Galaxy Podcast is something you can find as well. And please go to cornerofthegalaxy.com, all of our articles, and go to latimes.com and read all of Kevin's articles. He likes the traffic. He likes the interaction, so please hit him up there. He would appreciate it. All right, that about does it for us. A very long Corner of the Galaxy from the box, almost 90 minutes of LA Galaxy talk, but if you guys have questions, we're always willing to answer. A lot more coming up this week. Live show on Thursday, so please join us there. LA Galaxy face off against the Seattle Sounders on Sunday. Nationally televised game on ESPN, 1 p.m. kickoff time. All right. For Mr. Kevin Baxter of the LA Times, I'm Josh Guesman of Corner of the Galaxy, and you've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy from the box podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast, and be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. And for all of your independent LA Galaxy news, discussion, and entertainment, including this podcast, head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com. Fans, thanks for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.